For this video, I want to look through the basic format for question 1, the melody writing question 1 in the Leaving Cert composition paper. And when I say the format, what I mean is this writing that you see over the top. So whenever you're doing question 1 in the Leaving Cert composition paper, you should follow this very specific format. Bars 1 to 4, you're given those. Those are part of the question. Bars 5 and 6, they want you to develop bars 1 and 2. So when I say develop, it means alter them slightly, and I'm going to look at that in a few moments. Bars 13 and 14, you're also going to develop bars 1 and 2, so it's basically the same process that you're using for bars 5 and 6, you're just doing it slightly differently. Bars 7 and 8, you have to modulate to the dominant. So that means that's where your modulation is, which we'll have a whole video on in the future, but I'll talk about it very briefly in a moment. Then you've got in bars 9 and 10, they want you to use a sequence, which is a compositional device that we're going to talk about again much more in a future video, but also later in this one. In bars 11 and 12, they want you to use an imperfect cadence. Okay, and at the very end then, bars 15 and 16, they want you to use a perfect cadence, and they want you to end on note do, so end on the tonic note of the key you're in. Okay, let's look at all of that in more detail. So bars 1 to 4 you're given, that's what you have to work with. That's your opening 4 bars. You're kind of expected to use the musical material you've got in those bars when you're composing the rest of it, when you're composing your own further 12 bars. And here's how you do that. So, like I said, bars 5 and 6 are development of bars 1 and 2. So these bars here, these bars are development of bars 1 and 2, the development of these bars. And when I say development, it means that you just alter it slightly, and you can kind of see how I've done that. So if you look at what you've been given in bars 1 and 2, you got EDE, and I've just repeated that, EDE again here. The only difference is, when they have B, sorry that was ED sharp E, when they have B, A, G sharp, I've just changed the order of those, I've changed it to G sharp, A, B. Okay, so you're just developing it, you're changing it very, very slightly. In bar 2, I've also changed that slightly. They've got the notes going up the way, A, B, C sharp. I've got C sharp, B, A. Again, just like a mirror image, just coming down the way instead of going up. Okay, so you can see how I've developed bars 1 and 2 in here. If you go down to bars 13 and 14, again you develop bars 1 and 2. So once again, I've got this E, D sharp, E. You're allowed to use lots of repetition in this, so you actually expect you to. And then instead of B, A, G sharp, or instead of G sharp, A, B like I had, you've got B, it's kind of like B, G sharp, B, but you've got this little A passing note in here. So again, essentially the same notes, you've just changed it up slightly. And in bar 14, I've just got A, C sharp, B instead of A, B, C sharp. Again, same notes, just a different order. So when you're developing bars 1 and 2, all you're really doing is changing the order of some of the notes, making them lead to different places. Instead of leading from, say, B down to G sharp, and then going back up through A, B, C sharp in the next bar, I've done it so that it's going up first, G sharp, A, B, and then coming down, C sharp, B, A in the next one. That's all it really means when it asks you to develop bars 1 and 2. And that's a really important thing to do. If you do that well, you've already got 4 of your 12 bars written. Really easy thing to do, just change some of the order of the notes in bars 1 and 2. Alright. Looking at bars 7 and 8, they want you to modulate to the dominant here. Now, if you look at some of our other videos, I've talked about key signatures where you can work out what key you're in. In this case, we're in the key of E. And we've also got a video on how to understand if you're in a particular key, how to work out what the dominant note is in that key. The dominant is basically the 5th note of the scale. So at the moment, let me just get a new color. At the moment we're in the key of E major. So the notes are E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and D sharp. That may have gone off the screen a little bit there. Those are the basic notes: E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and D sharp. Now the dominant, like I said, is the 5th note of the scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the dominant when you're in the key of E is B. That's all you have to do. So when you're modulating, if we're in the key of E major, we're going to now modulate to the key of B major because that's the dominant, it's the fifth note. So how do we do that? Okay, if you're modulating to the dominant, all you're doing is changing one note of the scale. And that means that the one you're going to change is you're going to sharpen the fourth note. Okay, so the fourth note in E is A. Fourth note is A. So we're going to sharpen that. We're going to change it from A into A sharp. Okay, so we're going to change A into A sharp. And that's essentially how we modulate to the dominant. As you can see here, I've got that A sharp in there. And that A sharp is going to lead to a B. So you've got your A sharp here, and that's going to lead to the note B. B comes right after it. That's essentially how you modulate to the dominant. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I'm going to go into much more detail in a future video when I talk all about modulations, but this is essentially how you do it. You find out what key you're in by looking at your key signature. You find out what the fifth note of that is. That tells you what key you're modulating to, so now we're modulating to B. And then you find out what the fourth note is, and you sharpen it, so it's an A sharp. Okay, that A sharp leads to B, to your home note of the new dominant key. That should essentially be done. That sharp note, that A sharp, or the sharpened fourth note of the scale, should always happen in bar 7. So let me just... So in bar 7, this is where you should have, somewhere in here you should have your sharp note, and you should be aiming to lead to a B chord. Okay, so you're aiming to lead to the chord B, or sorry, you're aiming to lead to chord 5 of your original key. In this case, that would be a B chord. The notes of B chord are B, F sharp, and D sharp. As you can see here, I've got B, F sharp, and D sharp. So that's how we modulate to the dominant. I'll go into much more detail in a future video on that, but that's essentially what you're doing in bars 7 and 8. Okay, so we've got bars 5 and 6, we've got bars 7 and 8, and we've also got our other development, which is at bars 13 and 14. What I want to look at next is bars 9 and 10. In bars 9 and 10, they want you to do a sequence. And what a sequence is you take a musical idea, that in this case it's going to last for 1 bar, and then you repeat that exact same musical idea up or down a certain amount. The distance between each note within the idea is the exact same as the first time it happened, but the beginning note, and hence all subsequent notes, are starting in a different place. So you can see in bars 9, I've got the notes B, G sharp, E, and then jumps up to an E and then a B. Those are all notes of the E chord. Back to your home key here, you're back to the key of E once you've modulated the dominant here, and now you've gone back to the original key of E. And then our sequence. All I've done is bring each one of these notes down a step. So I've brought that B, I've brought that down to an A. G sharp, I've brought that down to an F sharp. E, I've brought it down to a D sharp. Same thing here. That high E, I've just brought it down to a high G sharp, high D sharp rather. This B, I've just brought it down to an A, and that's all a sequence is. It doesn't have to come down. It doesn't even have to move in step. I find it's a much safer option to move in step, so I wouldn't have your sequence start in one place and then when it repeats, it's 4 or 5 ledger lines up. It's just much easier to move it in step. You can move it either down in step or up in step. I've chosen to move it down here. Different circumstances will mean different things, and I'll have a future video on sequences that will make it a lot easier to understand. But essentially that's what a sequence is. You take your musical idea, it's going to last for 1 bar, and then in the second bar you'll have that exact same idea, but the whole thing is shifted either down a step or up a step. Okay, moving on. Bars 11 and 12, that's these ones here. So bars 11 and 12, you're going to do an imperfect cadence. An imperfect cadence is a cadence that ends on chord 5. Okay, so you're going to end on chord 5. I'll just do a V here for the Roman numeral for 5. And in this case, you can start on any chord before it. Chord 1 is usually probably your best bet, so chord 1 to chord 5. So how do we work out what chord 5 is? Well, it's the exact same process as when we were modulating. We just take our notes to the scale, which we've got here, and then we count up to find note 5. And as you'll see, note 5 is actually it's the same one as the dominant. It's B in this case. So our imperfect cadence has to end on the chord B. that would be, I think I mentioned earlier, it was made up of the notes B, B, D sharp, and F sharp. And in this case, you can actually see that you've got B here, then you've got D sharp, and you've got F sharp, and you've got another B here. We've also got a little passing note of a C sharp, but it's ending on chord 5. It's ending on the B. And then you've got chord 1. You can see some of the main notes of that chord here on the strong beats. You've got the G sharp, which is one of the notes of the chord of E, and you've got E on the two main strong beats here. So you've got chord 1 going to chord 5. That's what an imperfect cadence essentially is. So just remember, chord 1 is whatever your home key is. In this case, it's E. So I'm trying to have an E chord in this bar. Chord 5, you just write out your notes of the E major scale like we did up here, or whatever scale you happen to be using, whatever key you happen to be in. Count up to find number 5, which is a B, and then you're going to use a B chord here. That's your imperfect cadence, ending on chord 5. Alright, so now we've got our 4 given bars at the beginning. We've developed bars 1 and 2 here. We've modulated to the dominant here. We've got our sequence. We've got our imperfect cadence. We've developed these. All you have to do next is have a perfect cadence ending on do. And a perfect cadence is just like the opposite of that imperfect cadence. It's chord 5 going to chord 1. And we already know chord 5 is B in this case, because we counted up and we found it. And chord 1 is E because it's our home note, it's our tonic note of the key. So chord 5, I've purely used the notes of the actual B major chord here. B, D sharp, and F sharp. You got B, F sharp, B, D sharp, B, D sharp. And that all leads up. And what I try to have at the end, what I always try to have is, if you're using solfege, it goes from T, that's 7th scale, to do. And it always ends on do. I've also added in a little octave jump here. It goes from E down to a lower E. You don't need to do that, it's just something that I've done. So try to remember you go from T to do. That is, in this case, D sharp, which is the last note of the scale, up to the next octave of E, the first note of the scale again. And that's how it ends. Always ends on do. It's one of the rules I think we discussed in another video. This is essentially the format for writing. There are plenty of other things to watch out for when you're doing the melody question, but this is the basic format that it always really needs to follow. And if you do this, this is in the major key. There are other rules for the minor key, but if you do this in the major key, you're going to do just fine. What I'm going to do next is quickly switch over and just give you a chance to actually listen to this melody that we've written now before I finish up.